October 27, 2023, Israel launches Operation Swords of Iron, a full-scale ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. Tens of thousands of troops cross over into Gaza. Their goal? To free the more than 250 hostages held in captivity and to completely destroy the terrorist organization known as Hamas. You see, Israel is still reeling from an attack that happened just a few short weeks before, a day known as the October 7th attack.
The October 7th Hamas attack.
October 7th attack.
October the 7th.
October the 7th.
The October 7th attack.
It's the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah, the conclusion of one of the most joyous and vibrant festivals on the Jewish calendar, a time when people come together to celebrate the reading of the Torah. It's a time of joy, unity, and devotion for the entire nation. The sun was just beginning to peak over the horizon as the first round of rockets entered Israel's airspace from the Gaza Strip. Hundreds more followed as air raid sirens started going off all around the country. Families raced to bomb shelters as the Iron Dome struggled to keep up with the barrage. As terrible as this was, Israel had faced rocket attacks many times before, and this seemed no different. Under cover of the rocket fire, thousands of terrorists, many of them dressed in civilian clothes, breached the Gaza border fence with explosives in dozens of places. They poured through the Gaza fence on foot, in vehicles, and even in motorized paragliders, all while somehow largely evading detection by the IDF. While some targeted strategic points such as military bases, jamming communications and destroying IDF equipment, further delaying the Israeli response, the majority of the attackers fanned out into the various towns and villages along the border. These monsters had only one mission: to terrorize, torture, capture, and kill as many Jews as they could. The cruelty knew no bounds. The terrorists spread from house to house, indiscriminately butchering men, women, children, and infants. They set up roadblocks and slaughtered anyone trying to escape. They set houses on fire. They threw grenades into bomb shelters. They abused, tortured, and killed in ways that are too horrendous to even describe. These attacks raged for hours as the military desperately scrambled to mobilize troops to the besieged Israeli communities. Many local security forces heroically sacrificed their lives as they engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the terrorists. As the sun set on that fateful day, nearly 6,000 people lay dead or injured in the rubble of what only the day before had been beautiful neighborhoods. Another more than 250 were dragged off as hostages to Gaza. This would go down as the largest terror attack in Israel's history and the most brutal attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Before we get into the details of what enabled the October 7th attack, it's important to understand that this buildup has been going on for decades. 1967, Israel miraculously wins the Six-Day War, liberating Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and the Gaza Strip. 1987, the First Intifada starts in Gaza, quickly also spreading to the regions of Judea and Samaria. In 1994, as part of a peace deal, Israel signs the Oslo Accords, giving control of the Gaza Strip as well as large parts of Judea and Samaria to the PLO. Tensions rose until 2005, when in a desperate measure for peace, Israel forcibly removed all Jewish residents out of the Gaza Strip, leaving the entire area in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. The region erupted again in 2007 as the Iranian-backed terror organization known as Hamas led a violent coup d'etat, seizing power from the PA, ended elections in any sense of democracy, and began a decades-long reign of terror. As Hamas took control of power in Gaza, they immediately began building infrastructure. Not schools or hospitals, no, Hamas began building a network of tunnels reaching deep into Israeli territory, designed specifically to carry out an attack much like October 7th. After shooting tens of thousands of rockets into Israel's south every year for 20 years, Hamas enacted their final solution: invade Israel on October 7th to torture, kill, capture, and kidnap as many Jews as they could. As the world reels in shock from the barbaric brutality that the Jewish nation faced on October 7th and wonders how an entire year later Hamas has not yet been defeated, the question on everyone's mind is this: how could such a horrific massacre happen? Where did all the weapons, the rockets, and as we later learned, massive terror tunnel network come from? How was this internationally recognized terrorist organization, Hamas, allowed to have control over all of the Gaza Strip? How could America and the rest of the world turn a blind eye when they knew full well that Iran was massively supporting terrorist groups right in Israel's backyard? Unfortunately, the truth is much worse than that. Not only did they turn a blind eye to the rising threat of Hamas and other radical Jew-hating groups in Gaza, but they also, in the name of peace, pressured Israel to exercise restraint in dealing with such terrorist organizations. In effect, they were giving Hamas free rein in the years leading up to the attack. Time we now know was spent building a massive weapons stockpile and terror tunnel network under the whole of Gaza. It gets worse. America, the European Union, and others have contributed billions of dollars to the Gaza Strip for several decades. Nearly every year since the early 2000s, hundreds of millions of dollars have flowed into Gaza and Judea and Samaria, all in the name of aid to the Palestinians, when in reality, that money has made its way straight into the hands of Hamas. Unfortunately, the terrorists in Gaza have been allowed to grow, flourish, and ultimately commit death and destruction, violence and terrorism, culminating in the massacres of October 7th. This truth is the reality on the ground, and it must never, ever be forgotten or allowed to happen again.
After all that we've just seen, we have to ask ourselves, what did October 7th teach us? What have we learned from everything that has happened since that fateful day? Well, we learned a hard truth, that the Arabs in Gaza, Judea, and Samaria do not actually want to live in peace side by side with Israel. 80% of them still support Hamas and their atrocities. Given the opportunity to govern themselves, when Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, they created a terror state, electing Hamas and using billions of dollars in international aid to build tunnels and acquire weapons to murder Israeli citizens. And this shouldn't surprise us. Our enemies have always made their intentions perfectly clear. The Bible tells us over and over that Israel's enemies will stop at nothing to prevent the Jewish people from living in our God-given homeland. But it's not just our Arab neighbors who want to take the land of Israel away from the people of Israel. The international community, led by the current administration of the United States, constantly call for a two-state solution. Let's be clear. A two-state solution means an Arab terror state in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of the Jewish people. In Joel chapter 3, the Bible warns us that God will bring judgment upon the nations for, quote, dividing my land, dividing God's land. That day is coming soon. We live in truly biblical times. the Jewish people have returned en masse from a 2,000-year exile to take possession of the land that God gave us, just as the Bible predicted. And just as the Bible predicted, we must fight those who stand against the Word of God. The time for weakness and compromise is over. After defeating Hamas, Hezbollah, and all her other enemies, Israel must proudly tell the world once and for all, the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. Peace will come only when Israel is strong. As the Bible tells us, the Lord will give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
As we commemorate the one-year anniversary of October 7th, the most horrific event to happen to the Jewish people since the Holocaust, the time has come to make a stand. The two-state solution is dead, and ironically is the worst solution for both Jews and Arabs. A Palestinian state would mean certain suicide for Israel and would result in more October 7th events that would be 100 times worse than what we saw last year. Jewish sovereignty in the entire land of Israel, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, Gaza, and all of Israel is the only path forward and will result in peace and prosperity for the entire Middle East. If you are a believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you believe in the Holy Scriptures, we invite you to take a stand for Israeli sovereignty in the land of Israel. To join the movement, visit www.keepgodsland.com or click the link in the description below.